Good to see you. Like Brian mentioned, we're going to go through the presentation. So what we wanted to do this morning is quickly go through.
This is Chris. I just want to see if you guys can hear me out there. I will be the man behind the curtain. Can you hear me better now if I speak a little closer to the microphone? Better? All right. I can always speak up. People know that. So I'll just yell out the window if I need to. We are streaming the meeting to YouTube. And it looks like about 1:28. So Mr. Chair, will be your call whenever you want to call the meeting to order in a couple minutes.
Got you over here, and we got a quicker for when you give your presentation.
Randy, could you come to the window? Hello.
Oh, hi. Anyway, you said to say her.
I'm trying to think the last name.
I can't Sawyer.
Oh, Mike Sawyer. Holy cow. Yeah.
That'll work.
Okay.
But I'm going to call it up on the screen here. So I got to load it up.
All right.
You will notice right next to your nameplate, there's a clicker. That will allow you to advance the slides. So we'll see a full, just do your thing. Right?
Oh, all right. Thanks. Awesome.
Where
Yeah.
did you see Mike?
He's Chris.
I just wanted to know for that state. Okay.
So we're doing.
Okay.
Come here for a couple of days and then we're gonna go to
Okay,
Richmond
thank
at the end of May.
Did he come down with a group?
His wife and three kids.
That's your job.
Yeah, music still do.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I did it more, I did like that, but then we're like, let's show you more.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, right. Have you been to Tampa?
Yeah, he was there in December for that international park.
I was thinking of
It's probably the parking ability institute is like, but yeah, our parking division manager, he usually presents and crest.
Yeah.
So some people are kind of like, yeah.
But you gave the grant to her this time.
Yeah, and I was just really thinking I was figuring out.
So same sort of thing.
No, I was there for a Churchill music festival, Irish festival.
Okay. Yeah, St. Patrick's Day. Irish flag, yeah.
Oh, I guess it was the end of March, so, but yeah.
I've been to that many times. They block off the streets.
I liked it. Yeah. My first time in the town.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Went to Libby Hill.
Yeah.
Montesco.
Yeah. Stony Brewery, right? Yeah. Miles stomping ground.
Yeah. I like it. Almost 300 years old.
Yeah. Did you get into the fan area at all? Like just
Yeah.
the restaurants and.
Hey, this is Chris with a quick procedural note before we begin. The microphones are push to talk. So if you do want to speak during the meeting, just push it, should light up red. And then when you're done, you can push to release it and turn it back off.
A little red button.
That worked, Bill. I heard you. Thanks.
Do we need to turn the microphone on in order to be recording? Okay. All right. So everyone should use them. Okay, well, I think we have a sufficient number. Everybody ready to begin? Welcome, Brandy. Member, yeah. Officially. All right, well, let's call this April meeting of the TBARTA Citizens Advisory Committee to order. It's about 1:32. We can start off with the roll call of the members. Lorraine?
Can everyone hear me? Okay. Bob Henyon. Bill Roberts.
Here.
Bob Widmer.
Present.
Lynn Gruber White.
Present.
Josh Frank.
Present.
Richard Bedford. Richard Balcom. Travis Norton.
Present.
Bill Johnson.
Present.
Rick Richmond. David Goodwin. Karen Mullins.
Here.
Sarah Calhoun.
Here.
And Brandy Miklas.
Here.
And that does give us a quorum.
All right.
Two on the phone, huh? Or where are
So
they?
we have a physical quorum in the room, and we have, I think, 2 members attending virtually. So we do have a quorum. Thank you, Lorraine. We have a motion on our agenda to allow our online attendees to participate and vote. And I have a statement that I need to read. Regarding extenuating circumstance considerations, Florida law requires a quorum of the Citizens Advisory Committee to be physically present to conduct business, and generally requires all members in addition to the quorum to be physically present to participate as well. However, the law provides an exception for some members to participate by non-physical means if a quorum is physically present and if circumstances can be characterized as extraordinary as determined in the legislative direction of the city's discretion of the Citizens Advisory Committee. In anticipation of such a finding, we have certain members willing and able to participate virtually today. Said members are linked electronically and are prepared to receive the same information as the members physically present, and will be able to effectively communicate with the remaining members of the Citizens Advisory Committee and the members of the public. With that, I recommend the Citizens Advisory Committee consider whether extenuating circumstances exist that warrant the virtual participation of, and if you will name the 2 virtual attendees.
Karen Mullins and Sarah Calhoun.
Thank you. Due to the current COVID-19 pandemic, as supported by the following: the increase in COVID-19 cases in our region and around the world. Number 2, the CDC's determination that limiting close face-to-face contact with others is the best way to reduce the spread of COVID-19, especially with indoor environments. And thirdly, the CDC's recommendation to maintain a physical distance of 6 feet from other people, from other individuals. With that, I'll entertain a motion to accept virtual attendees as full participants.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hear a second. Lynn, thank you. Any discussion? All those in the room, please say aye.
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 All right. Our virtual attendees are now welcome and able to participate as full members of the meeting. Thank you very much for that action. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone signed up virtually or in person for public comment?
We do not have public comment.
All right. Seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda item, and that is the approval of the February meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Bill Johnson moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Lynn, thank you. We have a second. I think we can do this by voice vote for approval of the minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Sarah? Okay, the motion carries. So the minutes are approved. So the next item on our agenda is presentations. We have two today. The first is the Tampa Riverwalk expansion, and let me welcome our newest member who is finally able to sit in as a full member, Randy Miklas. We're glad to have you, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Should I present like this the whole time?
It's up to you if you want to present it from there or if you want to come to the podium. It's your call. Wherever you present from, just make sure you take your clicker with you.
Should work. All right. I'm going to take my mask off. You guys don't mind. Good. Mhm.
Did anyone who just joined us come to participate in public comment? I want to afford an opportunity. Okay, thank you, Brandy. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Thank you. Actually, I just realized, let's see. This is the PDF. Let me just practice. It should, usually I cheat and do like view full vote. You know, I might need to do that. Yeah, you go to view and it says full screen mode. And then I'll kind of access. Yes, awesome. Okay. It might kind of have a mind of its own though. I don't know. Well, I can totally do this presentation without the slides too. It's not, I was just trying to go back and it's not working. No. Yeah, maybe, do you mind scrolling? Oh. And then, yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandy Miklas. I'm the Infrastructure and Mobility Program Coordinator for the City of Tampa. And I am here today, not just as a CAC member, but also to give you a little sneak peek into a few things that the city is doing to expand our low stress walk bike network. Before I move on to the from the opening slide, I wanted to touch on the fact that when Mayor Jane Castor came into office in 2019, she wasn't your typical politician. She was retired from as police chief for the Tampa Police Department, and she decided to have some advisory committees formed and to help identify some areas for improvement in multiple areas, specifically, one of them specifically transportation. So the Transportation Advisory Group helped define her vision for transforming Tampa's tomorrow. And there's 5 parts of the transportation aspect. One is to implement premium transit. So we've got right now, an example of that for the city is the Tampa streetcar. And extending that. It's a very successful project, high ridership, and it's free fare right now. And we really do love the Tampa streetcar. Number 2 is to expand greenways and trails. This project is a great example of that. Third is a commitment to Vision Zero, to really get to that vision of zero, or to get to zero traffic fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. And then the last 2 items are modernizing our urban parking and connecting it to mobility. A good example of that, to tie it to transit, is we're going to be funding from our parking revenues, 500,000, so $500,000 to the streetcar operations, so we can maintain fare-free service. That'll be starting up next fiscal year. So that means starting up October 1st. And then last but not least is more emphasis on engagement and education, and really listening to the community, listening first. And so of those 5 major components for the transportation part of transforming Tampa's tomorrow, I just really wanted to just kind of lead with that and tie it all together. So let me go ahead and get started with this. So I'm here to give you an update on where we are and what we're trying to accomplish with our West River District project. It's a mouthful, but it's essentially it's to get folks to be able to move around on the west side of the river safer and more comfortably. And that is with a combination of trails. So that's where the extension of the Riverwalk comes into play on the west side of the river, as well as complete streets. So separated bike lanes, enhanced crossings, and really connecting the neighborhoods that are on the west side of the river to downtown, to the east-west Green Spine cycle track, to take transit, as well as to connect folks to have better access to the river. So we were very fortunate to get a federal grant through the Federal Highway Administration. Right now, the program is known as RAISE, R-A-I-S-E, but when we received the $24 million, that was through the BUILD program, and I'm not able to move forward, sorry. Okay, but yeah, just wanted to let you know, this has been a long time coming. We have been wanting to work on this type of project within the city for years. It took years to expand and connect the existing Riverwalk. It actually took quite a few Tiger grants, which was something that the city was starting to apply for back in 2009. And so with this announcement, a lot of it is we're very grateful to Representative Kathy Castor for her help in that as well, and just realizing that commitment to expanding our greenways and trails. So a part of the West River project is the Vision Zero component I mentioned earlier. We, as a city, committed to Vision Zero, and we entered in what is known as the Vision Zero Network. So it's, I'm sure most of you are very familiar with this, but a quick, in a nutshell, it's not only, of course, to eliminate all roadway fatalities and serious life-changing injuries, but to have a smarter, safer approach to our whole transportation system. And so, and that why is the next slide. I'm probably moving it a little too fast, but 44 people on average killed in the city of Tampa, based on 2014 to 2018 data from the state of Florida, almost 300 severely injured. Well, those numbers actually have almost doubled from in 2021, and that is a nationwide, unfortunately, a nationwide trend. And so this is the time to have a plan, and we have a Vision Zero action plan. We actually just finished that. The city of Tampa's Vision Zero action plan was finalized at the end of last year. And that safe system approach, safer people, safer streets, safer speeds, safer vehicles. And then of course, the data component, understanding if we have better data, we can see, are the changes we're incorporating, are they making an impact? And if they are, then let's use them more, and let's not have a spot treatment. Let's try to have a holistic approach with this. So this is part of our overall mobility plan. The city has never had a citywide mobility plan, but we started it last year. It's called Tampa Moves. Vision Zero is more of like the short-term aspect of that plan, kind of like a 5-year plan to help us with the safety component. So back to the project, just wanted to give a snapshot of there's a lot of names on that screen, but really what it comes down to is the West River project is a project that is multidisciplinary. It is not just a mobility department project. It is the City of Tampa project and the Communities project. We are working with Parks and Recreation team because there's a lot of trail aspects, not in addition to the roadway aspects. So this slide gives you a kind of a small visual from this view, but on the right-hand side, you can see downtown has the blue, that's the river, Hillsborough River that goes right through it. And we are trying to, with this project, better safely connect folks and have a lower stress walk bike network on the west side of the river. One of the projects, all right, one thing I should note, kind of don't want to bury the lead. We are publicly advertising this project this summer. So we are wrapping up what is known as the, with the Federal Highway Administration, the formal grant agreement. It's just a prescriptive process when you have federal funding that's just making sure that we have all of the minimum criteria, the design standards, everything that we need to have in this project before it hits the streets to get a design build contractor on there. You know, it has, we just want to make sure that it's been vetted through the process, and it's right now it's being under review with USDOT. What we will do once we advertise, we'll get a contractor on board, and you'll see design efforts underway in 2023. You'll see construction starting in 2024, and we'll have it substantially completed by the end of 2026. So it's gonna take some time, but we're gonna be really proud of it once it's finished. It's a little over 6 miles, by the way. And I mentioned, let me go back. I mentioned before, one of the emphasis parts of the safety component of this that I wanted to mention is all of the multimodal facilities. So all of the pedestrian, bicycle, micromobility with seated scooters that are coming citywide. Our e-bike program, we're expanding our micromobility program from the pilot. But all of those facilities will be separated from automobile traffic. And we'll have enhanced crossings, enhanced rectangular rapid flashing beacons where, you know, pedestrians, you know, activate the flashing beacon. So it's a little more visual for folks to get across the road. And where physical barriers are not possible, we're going to have striped separation and vertical delineators. So wherever it's appropriate to have physical separation, we will. And if not, we will have other means of separation. We'll also have shared the road markings in areas where we aren't able to have a separate bike lane. So I will probably be, it's okay. It's a little funky with me using my PDF, but I just wanted to give you a little tour of the project. So we're going to start on the river segment. If you look at the right-hand side, that's where the graphic is always going to be on these slides. The left is going to have images, some very, very high concept plans, but the right-hand side, you'll see we have some overwater segments, probably the more expensive parts of the project actually. And so if you're familiar with the existing Riverwalk by Kennedy Boulevard, there's an overwater segment. So we're going to have some overwater segments starting by the Platt Street Bridge. It's kind of close to the Bayshore Publix, to give you a little reference. And then it's going to continue north. We'll also have an overwater segment underneath the Broarine Street Bridge. And then we'll go along Hug the River. There's some private development there right now. And this part actually gives you an example of some of the river segments, or the trail segments, I should say, that are already completed. So in some ways, this project is filling in the gaps, not only in the trail segments, but also in the complete street segments. So this is an example of some of the existing Manor Riverwalk is the name. Actually, I think they actually have a new owner. It's Arabelle Riverwalk. Those are some luxury apartments that are right there at the start of this project. We have some very conceptual, just like a blue line at this point, but just to represent some of those pedestrian underpasses that I was referring to, the overwater segments. So that's the Platt Street Bridge on the left, and then you can see the Broarine Street Bridge on the right. The Selman Expressway, Thea's Expressway is also nearby on this part of the project. So we have some more of the private development that we'll be connecting to. And then when we get into the next segment, we're getting closer into, we're getting up to Kennedy Boulevard and approaching University of Tampa. We're approaching Tampa Preparatory School. We're approaching Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park. So I'm just gonna kind of give you a little bit of a tour. I'm probably gonna fast forward a little faster than I mean to, but that's okay. And we are keeping the information on these slides consistent throughout because we have been presenting this to Friends of the Riverwalk. We've been presenting this to the Hillsborough Transportation Planning Organizations, a Citizens Advisory Committee, and their other committees. And we've also been presenting to industry companies that are interested in the project. So we want to just keep the information that we've been sharing consistent. And also, I'm not an engineer, I'm an urban planner with a communication degree as well. And so I will not be getting into the weeds on each of these, but if you do have some questions and if I'm not able to handle, or I'm sorry, if I'm not able to answer them, I can get with our project team and follow up. So we're rounding to Julian B. Lane Park and this graphic right here. And if you're familiar with the existing Riverwalk in this area, on the right-hand side, you've got Armature Works, and you've got a connection from the west side of the river to the existing Riverwalk. You also have Rick's on the River. That's kind of like our northern area of where this project will connect over to. And maybe some of you are bicyclists. If you have ever ridden on the North Boulevard Bridge, that our project's going to connect to the bridge. It's actually not a part of the bridge, but a lot of bicyclists refer to that as Candy Mountain because the views are so sweet. I think that's why they call it that, at least. So it's an emphasis over here is just we don't have a lot of continuous connectivity. So it's all about filling in those gaps. And then on the later, actually, and I'll wait till I get to that slide, I'll show you the connection we're going to have with the upcoming redevelopment that's occurring in the West Tampa area. So we've got some images. This is kind of close to, I believe this is actually close to Blake High School when you're coming over here. And then the segment on the left-hand side that's highlighted in kind of light yellow is the part of the trail that's going to be connecting to the Rome Yard development. So that's a mixed-use redevelopment project that is currently underway. There's a website for the project called romeyard/tampa.com. And you can see where we're connecting, it's a little zoomed in, but this is a part of West Tampa that doesn't have a lot of easy to use and safe, less and not stressful walk bike areas. We also have some living shorelines as part of the project, that sustainability and resilience element coming into play. We want to prepare ourselves for major storms, hurricanes, and so that is also a part of the project. Some of our projects, we've used the simple tool called Street Mix to kind of give a visual of some of the roadway segments. So right now I'm about to enter into the project segment 3, which is along Platt Street. Platt Street's a one-way street. And if you're not terribly familiar with it, it takes you from South Tampa into downtown. So there's a bike lane on there right now. Part of this project will have a protected, separated bike lane as so that way it's not just a bike lane along Platt Street. So we have that part. Rome Avenue and Columbus Drive, those are some of the other on-street components. Rome Avenue is the westernmost portion of our project, goes through the West Tampa neighborhood. There's a lot of restaurants, a lot of coffee shops, a lot of activity, a lot of commerce, a lot of, we're just seeing a lot more pedestrians. And so we actually had some anecdotal, just some conversations with folks on the streets recently, and they're very excited that this is coming. So, we're excited to tell them a little bit more about it. And then this is still that segment for Rome Avenue kind of gives you, we're able to actually build upon a project that Hillsborough County is doing along Columbus Drive. So some of these projects that were ongoing with different entities or different agencies, we're able to kind of build in and incorporate into the project. There's that Columbus Drive. This next one that I'm about to get to, I might be cutting it off, but segment 6 is a neighborhood called Ridgewood Park. It's actually has I'm going to cut a little bit off it, but it actually has a part, thank you, that's already been constructed. So on the right-hand side, you see there's a lot of like dotted line. That means that's part of the project that we're going to be building and adding to. Any of the non-dashed lines are parts of the trail and or the roadway network that's already been completed. So this is an example of the butterfly garden in Ridgewood Park, what we'll be connecting to. Now here is a rendering. We grabbed a couple from the romeyard-tampa.com website to give you an idea of kind of like what their project will look like, their master plan will look like at build out. And they're going to be completing their project around the same time as ours in late 2026. I think for them, they're going to be going into 2027, but the boat slip, those slip ramps you see, those are existing, and that's where Rick's on the River is, just to kind of give you a context for that. And that's another rendering of the Rome Yard development that we'll be connecting to. So this project is going to connect and build upon other multimodal and safety projects that we have going on within the city or partnerships with the city and the county. And then I have a list of those on the left-hand side. It's a little difficult to see from here, but just know this, I'm going to just continue to say it. We are filling in those gaps with this project, and we really want to expand our low stress walk bike network. And then what's an additional benefit with this project is we get to connect neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods that are both north and south of the interstate. So it provides that additional connectivity. So with this project, Federal Highway Administration, we have specific accessibility guidelines that we must follow. So that this gives you a little taste of what we're looking at. In the industry, it's known as PROAG. I did not know that until this project. So you learn something new every day. We also have had a lot of community and neighborhood outreach before the project was even funded. So the next slide just gives you an idea of a list of many of the neighborhood associations we've reached out to, citizens advisory committees from the planning organization to the West Tampa CRA, Friends of the Riverwalk, and of course, University of Tampa, Mayor's Alliance for Persons with Disabilities, actually we just spoke with again. Just want to make sure that they know this is coming, because we want to try to make sure we're coordinated. If there's any other projects that are going on, we can make sure that we explain, that these are projects that are coming up in the next few years. We also have done a cultural resource assessment as part of the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, as part of the NEPA requirements with the project. And then this is one of my last slides. I've grayed out a good bit of what has already been accomplished with the build grant. And what's still to come is we will be presenting to City Council, Tampa City Council, likely later this month, April 21st. And it's just what we normally do when we have a federal grant. You present the grant agreement, and it's a full execution of the grant agreement at that time, and then we'll be publicly advertising the project. Let's see, you've got a few next steps. I guess I just kind of went over that so I can go. And then I have a couple images of some partners and our stakeholders. It doesn't list everyone up there, but just wanted to kind of give you an idea. And the City of Tampa is a member of NACTO, the National, city transportation officials. I just breezed over the N and A there, but we are a member city of NACTO, and it's been helpful with design guidelines and looking at our streets and the connectivity design guidelines that we want to have, because when you're designing your roadways, we want to design it for all users and not just one particular mode. And so NACTO's been very helpful being part of that organization. And one of our other partners is the community. This is an example of an open streets event that we partnered with On Bikes with last May along Bayshore. We actually just had a similar one. It was a smaller scale, but it was in VM Ybor. And it was to talk about some improvements along 14th Street that goes along VM Ybor neighborhood. VM Ybor is located just north of historic Ybor. And we had an event called Unlock the Block, where you close the street to roadway traffic, and for like 4 or 6 hours, you just walk, bike, and play. And so we want to open up the other side of the river so we can have a map that shows different destinations and places to be connected to on the left-hand side, on the west side, like you see right now on the right-hand side. So that is my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandy. Lots of good material in there. Good presentation. Questions from the committee? Bill Johnson?
Thank you. What's the total project cost?
It is 30 million. So we have 24 million that we got from the Federal Highway Administration, and 6 million is coming from the city. So about 80 federal, 20 city.
Thank you.
By the way, project costs continue to go up. But that's what we estimated, and that's what we're keeping to, because that was what we submitted in our grant application.
And that's the grant application that's referenced in this presentation.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it.
We also have a project website. If you'd like to look at any additional information, it's tampa.gov/West River Build.
I have a question. Part of the transportation plan in the city of Tampa is the expansion of the streetcar.
Mhm.
I know this is a West River project, but can you speak to any plans to interconnect with the potential expansion of the streetcar?
Oh, yeah. Well, right now, the Tampa streetcar runs a little, I think it's about 2.5 miles, goes from Ybor, connects a lot of the development activity in Water Street, and then goes to downtown Tampa. The extension we're looking at goes north and connects to Tampa Heights. So right now, the terminus would be Palm Avenue near there's a Central City YMCA right there. So that's right at kind of the heart of some of the commercial district, if you will, for Tampa Heights. So the future expansion plans, there's definitely, we don't want to stop there. So we do recognize we've always wanted to have a transit connection from downtown Tampa to where we are right now, to the airport and to the West Shore Business District. And so that is a premium transit corridor that has been studied many years. And there is a purpose and a need for that connection. And so what this project would do with the West River connection, West Tampa community would be even like more suited and better connected to a transit options that would also go east-west.
Good. Yes, Josh.
Yeah, thank you. I know that in addition to the West River Walk, there's the list of sort of sister projects that crisscross it in a variety of different ways. I'm curious, a lot of those seem to be some of the bridges, which would connect both the East and West River Walk together. Has there been any consideration for an independent bike ped only connection from the West River Walk to the East River Walk in terms of a bridge? So that way, we've got some really great connectivity between both halves of the river.
So right now we have the Green Spine cycle track that goes along Cass Street over the river. But like you said, that's a bridge, the Cass Street Bridge. That's a CSX bridge as well, facility. So you're talking about a separate only walk, bike, non-vehicular bridge connection. That's a good suggestion. And when we spoke with the Friends of the Riverwalk, they are in motion to do a feasibility study to look at a connection from the east side of the river to the west side. It's not quite a traditional walk bike pedestrian bridge. They're looking at examples from all over the world when you have to cross a body of water. So it's almost like everything is being considered. You might as well, with a feasibility study, look at like a universe of alternatives. So the Friends of the Riverwalk are looking at that, and they informed us of that earlier this year. So we're making sure to stay close with them and coordinate. And when they have findings, we'd like to look at them.
Other questions from the committee? I have one more. I'm sorry, Bill Johnson, go ahead.
Well, I have an extra one. The Friends of the Riverwalk, is that a public group, or is that just a nonprofit?
I believe they are nonprofit. I'm not-
Yeah.
They have a board. They meet monthly. Their website is fantastic.
And their funding comes from events that they sponsor, or?
Well, one of their major charges is really to activate the Riverwalk, activate how people can connect and play and just kind of live with the river. I mean, we have this wonderful gym in the middle of our downtown, at least for the city of Tampa. So my understanding is that yes, they probably do receive funding. I should look into it more, Bill, but they do have a really snazzy, well-organized group and website.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, Randy, we're a regional transit authority. This plan, I think, goes under the interstate where there's a proposed BRT, which we monitor. Have you given any thought to how and where this project might provide service for people to use the new connectivity you're building and access the BRT, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, with the regional rapid transit
Yes,
project.
yeah.
I need to brush up on the identified stops and stations, because that's where you have connectivity. So it would be, I mean, it would be good to just make sure that we have that as part of the as part of the considerations of other projects, of other modes, and the connectivity to that.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking, is it, I mean, this, obviously you're not going, nothing is obvious these days, but I don't anticipate there'd be a separate stop to connect with this project, but there needs to be some interconnectivity between the Riverwalk, both east and west. And so people could get there by bike or other transportation and connect with the BRT when it's
Yeah.
built. So,
Well, if there's a stop in downtown Tampa, then it would connect to this project
okay,
in multiple ways. Yeah.
good, yeah. Josh?
Well, maybe this is more of a comment, but I do think you point out something important, is that how does this project relate to our duties as a regional entity? And some of the things that I think there's potential in seeing this being expanded and the success that the Riverwalk has had, to perhaps think on our end, how we can begin to connect some of our more successful trail networks in the region. So for example, how do we get from the Pinellas Trail to the Tampa Riverwalk? Right now, there's no real great method. And if there is, it's really not very well identified with wayfinding and communications and that sort of thing. So I think it's well within our realm of possibility to consider how to connect these trails regionally. And that's maybe something we can talk about at a later date. But I think this just sort of bookends that thought of, this is another realm of regional transit that we can consider.
You know, I just came from a meeting with the Florida Greenways and Trails Council. and I learned so much. And I wanted to give them kind of a context. We were South Pinellas County. Basically, if you're driving, it would be like the last exit before taking the Skyway Bridge. And yeah, Boyd Hill. Does that make sense? Boyd Hill. Yes. Hammock Hall. We were at Hammock Hall. And I looked to see if I biked from that location to downtown Tampa, like where would it route me? And, like what my options were and how long. And it would be a little under 4 hours. And it would be utilizing Pinellas Trail, connecting over to Courtney Campbell. And I was just thinking about that aspect and kind of just giving them context. But yeah, I learned so much. There's so much underway. So it would maybe even be worth kind of getting a project overview in the future from someone from that council.
Well, there's a new project for you. You can take on a bike route from South Pinellas to the downtown Tampa.
Oh, there's also a study that someone's looking at on the Gandy Bridge. And I believe there's going to be, as part of that study, an emphasis on a bike connection.
Great. Any other questions? Any questions from our virtual participants, Sarah or Karen? Well, thanks I'm sorry, Travis.
Yep. This is more of a comment too. Just to build on it. Well, thanks for Bill and Josh for talking about how it fits in with TBARTA, but I also feel like it would fit in a sense of first mile, last mile transit options for local residents to get to transit. So I think it would fit in with that scenario if you frame it that way.
I completely agree. We actually, the city's pilot program with our micro mobility program, so the scooters and e-bikes, we had a pilot with 1,800 different micro mobility vehicles, and we're going to be expanding citywide. It's going to be deployed out, in different zones. It's not going to be like overnight. And with that comes seated scooters in addition to the stand-up scooters. I guess I already mentioned e-bikes. And it's the emphasis on access for all abilities. So there's going to be some of the micromobility vehicles are going to be able to accommodate for all abilities versus the ones that we see that we're familiar with right now. And it does tie in because we've noticed people are using it not just for entertainment. They're using it to, go to the grocery store and get to work. And the average trip length is just under 1.3 miles.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Brandy, thanks very much. Again, welcome to the committee.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. The next item on our agenda is a presentation on the RRT concept, and Scott Pringle is not able to be with us today, but I think we're going to actually watch the presentation that he would have made because he made this presentation to the TBARTA board. So with the committee's indulgence, we'll actually watch that video. You ready to go, Brian, or?
I believe so.
Chris?
Chris, you got it queued up? Looks like you do. So we can go ahead and just.
Yep, we're ready to begin. Here we go.
I'm going to sit back and watch the movie.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board members. Good to see you. Like Brian mentioned, we're going to go through the presentation. So what we wanted to do this morning is quickly go through an update on some of the items we're working on, just like Brian mentioned. But before that, I kind of want to go through a reminder of what the locally preferred alternative is, which you adopted in August of last year of 2021. And I know for everyone in the room, we definitely understand we've been having this conversation for quite some time as in regards to the different elements involved in that recommendation for that locally preferred alternative. It includes everything from some dedicated BRT lanes to operating in mixed traffic, as well as express lanes. But what we did recognize is, having that conversation with the general public is not that easy. With so many different elements, it gets confusing quick. So what we've developed is a public friendly video that we're going to put up to the website. I'm going to show you that video now. But we wanted to just give you guys a preview today. Again, just a quick video talking about what the LPA is. More importantly for this morning's conversation is, we understand what the locally preferred alternative is. What are some of those treatments that we're looking at in terms of how the alignment works? But the next question is, how does the service operate? So how long during the day does it operate? How frequent? And how does it make those connections to those different stations? So we've gone through a number of different iterations over the years in identifying what would be the preferred operating plan for the RRT and the locally preferred alternative, always focused on performance and of course cost. And what we're looking at right now is essentially a service plan that includes a total of 4 combined routes. Within those 4 routes, we're anticipating about 22 vehicles needed to run the service. Right now, at this point in time, we're assuming that those are hybrid diesel vehicles. You can see roughly the approximate cost operationally per year to run that service at just being over 7.5 million. You'll notice that in the center of our region, there's multiple routes that are overlapping. So what happens in those areas is because of the overlapping routes, we actually get a higher effective headway because you have, like I said, multiple routes operating at the same time. In those areas, our highest frequency is about 7.5 minutes connections to each one of those stations. We're also looking at providing the service between 6 a.m. in the morning and all the way up to 10 p.m. in the evening. The importance of having those late evening hours is the opportunity to continue to serve folks within the community, make sure they can get to jobs, even if they're not traditional 9-to-5 jobs. So some of the other unique parts of this 4-route plan, and I'm going to go through each one of the routes individually here in the next couple of slides, but we do have some great opportunities to have a 1-seat ride from Pasco all the way to downtown Tampa. We also have a 1-seat ride from St. Pete to Tampa. And that breakpoint in downtown Tampa is really predicated on all the data that we've looked at over the years. We know that that's really where the core 2 travel markets are within our region, north to Tampa, and then of course, St. Pete to Tampa. But I talked a little bit about that opportunity to leave the interstate and make that direct connection to the airport. We've also been looking at the opportunity to leave the interstate and make a direct connection to the USF campus at the UATC. Obviously, FDOT is looking at initiating their PD&E to look at some potential improvements to Fowler Avenue. HART is also working on some concepts for bus rapid transit that might also be on that corridor. So again, this I think is an opportunity to partner with those local initiatives, complement them, take advantage of some of those investments to actually serve the residents or the students directly that are going to the campus. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start going through each one of those individual routes. The first route we call Route A is really 54 in Pasco all the way to West Shore. We're looking at every 15 minutes during the peak, every hour going to the airport. So it won't be every 15 minutes, but once an hour that would go directly to the airport. And you can see the list of stations listed here, which includes not only getting access to a station roughly around the interstate, Nebraska and Fowler area, but as well as that deviation that could potentially go directly to the University of South Florida campus. So that's the first route, Route A. Next slide is Route B. Now this would be occurring during off peaks, really just connecting Wesley Chapel to USF. You can see the stations listed there. The third route, we're naming Route C, next slide, is strictly between the USF area and the West Shore area. Again, this is looking at 15-minute service, hourly service to the airport. You can see the station served here as well. And the last route, Route D, is 15-minute all-day service going straight from downtown St. Pete to Tampa, serving all the stations here, including 2 stations in downtown St. Pete, Pinellas Park, Gateway, the airport, West Shore, and downtown Tampa. Next slide, Chris. So we just wanted to make sure we brought this information in front of the board today for any questions or for clarifications. Mr. Chair, I can pause here for questions, or in the essence of time, we can continue on.
Let's continue.
Okay. Next slide, please. So Mr. Ball is here with me today. What we really wanted to do is make sure that we're honoring the really robust conversation that occurred at this board in November of last year in regards to electric vehicles and the opportunity for electric vehicles on this project. So I'm going to have Bill go through some of the technology and then some of the things we'd like to actually review with you in the next couple of months.
Thanks, Scott. And Mr. Chair, members of the board, Bill Ball with Benish. Tyndall Oliver is now Benish. Thank you for mentioning that, Brian. You remember a little over a year ago, we started the technology discussion for vehicles with the board. And at that time, we identified the 5 technologies that we were looking at. They're indicated on this slide: the diesel, hybrid electric, battery electric, compressed natural gas, and the hydrogen fuel cell. So we spent time looking at those technologies, looking at other systems around the country, what they've been using, what their experiences are. And we really had 3 types of considerations that we looked at. There's performance, there's cost, and there's policy. So we're going to share just a little bit about that today and specifically talk about policy from your perspective and get your feedback going forward. Next slide. This gives you history back into the 90s as to the types of vehicle technologies that bus systems around the United States have used. So you can see the gold bar, that's diesel buses. Back in the 90s, practically every bus that was operated was diesel. So you see how that's changed over the years with alternative technologies. And that's down to less than 50% of the bus fleets around the country. One thing I'll note is you look at the alternative fuels on this slide, you see other alternatives, but you don't see battery electric. That's because it's such a small part of the total fleet in the country. It's not even showing up on the graph, really. It's part of other, so you don't see a lot of it yet. I'll give you some anecdotal information about that. If you think about how many buses are operating in the United States, about 75,000 buses last year. In 2019, there was about 450 buses deployed that were battery electric. Now in 2020, that's up to about 1,000, so it more than doubled. And then in 2021, it's up to about 3,500. So it's 3.5 times. So you can see the trajectory is really going up in terms of growth of battery electric, but it's not moved the needle much on the total amount of fleet out there. But that technology is changing rapidly. And we really think about a project that's going to be, if it's 10 years down the road when this project ultimately operates, for example, will the battery technology be there? Probably will, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide. So these are a few BRT projects around the country that provide information about the vehicles that they chose to move forward with in the last few years. It's just some good examples that give you the type of vehicle they chose in terms of the technology, the size of the vehicle. A lot of them are the 60-foot articulated vehicles. It really depends on the demand for the service and the amount of capacity you need on those vehicles. You see the manufacturers and the cost per vehicle at the time that those vehicles were purchased for these projects. Sunrunner is on here as well. You can see they chose the hybrid electric, and that's the Gillick brand, a 40-foot bus, and it was about $832,000 per vehicle at the time that they purchased those vehicles. So just some background to help us give a range of cost for what we might think about going forward. Next slide. This is that range of cost by technology. You can see that the electric technologies are the most expensive still, but the costs are continuing to come down pretty consistently from year to year as that technology continues to mature and there's more implementation. But it gives you an idea that hydrogen is not that highly utilized. Few applications, largely in other parts of the world, but battery electric is coming a long way, but it's still in the range of $1 to $1.5 million per vehicle. You can see that diesel is the least expensive, and that's the one that's been around the longest. So that just gives you a range from high to low for each of those technologies. Next slide. One of the challenges, if we were to implement this project today, that we might have concerns about is you look at vehicle range on a full charge. Today's technology, or at least in the last couple of years, and it's changing year to year in this technology, it's about 175 miles for a full charge. So depending on the type of service you're going to operate, that might become a challenge, or you might need to have on-route charging to allow that to continue happening throughout the day, while it's charging. But I will say that when you look at the last couple of years, that amount of vehicle range for battery electric continues to go up. So if we say 5, 10, 15 years from now, it's going to be more and more feasible to have battery electric for almost any type of transit service going forward. But you can see the range that comes from the other technologies, which is why it was a challenge in years past. And now that's changing as the technology of batteries continues to improve. So obviously, we're down to recommending either hybrid or electric or battery electric and comparing it to the cost of diesel. So you're familiar with the both from the capital cost and from the operating and maintenance cost. Depends on when you implement the project. If we had to choose today, we would be a little concerned about going battery electric because you would have to add a lot more vehicles to accommodate the range issue. But if this project likely will be implemented years down the road, then it becomes even more feasible to move to that battery electric. And that's the kind of discussion we want to have with the board today. Next slide. This is the cost comparison if it were 22 vehicles for each technology. So it gives you an idea of what that would be. Again, Commissioner, this is the upfront capital cost, not the benefits that you get that come later with the operating and maintenance cost and associated with that. So obviously it's going to be a little more expensive upfront. Again, that continues to fall each year as there are more and more deployed out there, then the manufacturers are able to reduce their prices as well. And that's continuing to happen. Next slide. Oh, I'm going to turn it over to Scott, talk a little bit about next steps.
So just as Bill mentioned, really what we wanted to hear from the board today is slight modifications to that locally preferred alternative. We were looking at those hybrid diesel vehicles based on the conversation we had in November and the actions and conversations that are happening at each one of the trans agency boards. We like to make sure that we're not going off the reservation. We're heading in the right direction, doing some additional analysis to look at what the costs would be and how electric vehicles could be implemented on this corridor. You know, we've got to look at everything from the length of the route, how many people are on the bus itself, how much AC are you running, what, you know, how many hills do you have to climb? So we can look at all those things and look at whether or not you're doing charging at your depot center, or you've got some en route chargers. You can see some of the costs here for a depot charger, up to 260,000, where en route chargers can be as much as 590,000 per charger. The benefit of an en route charger is you're not having to pull that vehicle offline, having it sit to charge. You have opportunities to charge it along the route. But we'd like to do some additional analysis to understand what is the spacing of those chargers in order to specifically to serve the RRT, given the length of the corridor. So next slide, please, Chris. We've got a really fancy tool that does this very thing. Was actually first developed when LA Metro converted to electric. Big property. It's definitely a very well-tested tool. And what we're asking of the board today is, you know, can we do this additional analysis, look at what the cost impacts are for the RRT, those infrastructure costs, those operating benefits, the potential need for a little bit bigger fleet size that are all electric vehicles to make the service we described earlier. And we'd like to come back to you at the next board meeting with some of those details and more discussion. That concludes my presentation as well.
All right. Brian or Chris, did you want to add anything to that before we open it up for discussion?
I'll just add that Scott's going to be coming to the board in April, basically giving an update on what the results of that analysis was from that bolt modeling tool that he was talking about. Because the board has expressed interest in the past about using fully electric vehicles. The unknown is that we're trying to figure out is, okay, well, if you want to go fully electric, how does that affect the fleet size? In the presentation you just saw, it said we need 22 vehicles. That's assuming diesel hybrid electric. If we go fully electric, that could increase the size of the fleet. So we need to find out, well, if so, how many more vehicles? How much is that going to increase the cost? What about charging stations? Because right now we're at about 150, I think 150 million is. We're at 150 million. We're at 150 million on the capital cost. If we go fully electric, it's likely that that price will go up. We want to find out how much. So that is what Scott will be coming back to the board in April to give an update on.
I have nothing else to add on that. No, I'll just note that Karen Mullins does have her hand raised.
Okay. Comments or questions from the committee? That was a lot of information to digest. And I wish Scott were here, but we'll catch him next time. So. All right.
May I?
Kit Lynn, go ahead.
I'm just back from the Transportation Association of South Carolina Annual Conference. And I can tell everyone here that one of the main topics of discussion was electric buses. But the topic of discussion is the cost of the buses, the fact that they can't stay on route and they have to bring them back to the barn in order to charge them. Therefore, for one route, they need 2 buses because they've got to have one in the barn at all times. And across the board, the batteries come out of warranty and within months, they need to be replaced. So you're talking somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 to replace those batteries. So, well, we have this mandate that we are supposed to be moving towards electric. There are so many obstacles when you're talking about true public transit. It looks like it could be a great thing for school bus because your school buses are running maybe 2 to 4 hours a day and they sit in the barn in the middle of the day. So that is a great, but how do you apply this with the technology that we have today? And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer. I'm just saying these are the discussions that are taking place by real agencies.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? I would just add to that I had the opportunity to attend a trade show in Orlando a month or 2 ago. And one of the things that struck me, Lynn, was a charger that I would describe as umbrella-like. It just kind of hangs over the bus and the bus pulls into it. And I think those were intended to be used at the various stations for interim charging. So there's a lot of new technology coming along. I didn't price them because I didn't want to take one home, but I think it's an interesting development. Any other comments or questions from the board or from the committee? Okay, well, that's good. Oh, I'm sorry, Karen, you're waving. Go
Hey
ahead.
guys, yeah, thanks. I just want to make mention, on the previous comments about layovers and getting the bus back to the barn. I know PSTA had looked into in-road charging stations. I don't know where they are with that. I do want to say that with the electric and even the hybrid, the cost for maintenance and operations goes down significantly. So it's a cost that we can, because it's a capital cost in the front, we can get funding easier for that than we can get for maintenance and operations. So we need to keep that in our forefront as we go forward. Thank you, Bill.
Sure thing. Thanks, Karen. Any other comments? I guess I just have one more. I mean, I looked at the routing. This was an excellent presentation, Brian. Thank you. And Chris for bringing it to us. And there are many locations where the proposed BRT will exit the interstate, go on to surface roads for some length to be determined in some cases. But thinking about Brandy's presentation earlier, what I saw was that in Tampa, that the northbound route would exit at or about Scott Street, which is right at the river. And I hate to be a broken record, but maybe you should add a link, a pedestrian bike link along Scott Street or some parallel street that could reach the proposed station, wherever that station ends up being located. It's just an idea.
Well, as part of the Tampa Moves process, the mobility plan, we are still asking for comments on expanding our walk bike network. So there's a map you can actually add where you're talking about where you'd like to go or specific route. So that's on the TPAMoves.org website, because the mobility plan isn't wrapped up yet. But once we are finished with it, we'll have a horizon of 30 years and a list of prioritized transportation projects. So.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Bob.
Yeah, Brian, I really like this presentation. I mean, you're putting rubber on the road because you've got figures in here that, okay, if you decide a timeline, this is what we can do today, tomorrow, 2025, 2030, as things get better and better or cheaper and cheaper or whatever. And you've got the experience of other people. I like your approach, the way you're doing this, because it seems it's well-founded, well-grounded, I think is a better way to put it. Thank you.
I'll pass on the compliments to Scott since he's the one that deserves it. So.
Okay.
Okay. Good. Yes, Josh, go ahead.
I guess this is more of a question. And you know, if it's a question for Scott, that's fine. The preferred alternative still shows running in BRT lanes north of downtown, which is something that has not made it through the tip list process in Hillsborough, is not something that's, you know, funded or planned or designed at this point in time. So I'm curious, what's the alternative for the RRT should that never come to fruition? It seems like there's a lot riding on that decision, and it's a pretty critical inflection point.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I guess there's a couple of paths forward. One, miracles could occur and the TPO could put that segment back in the tip. That's if we were going to pursue federal money for that portion of the project and have it included as part of TB Next. If that does not occur, the cost of building that freeway BRT lane in that part would have to be borne by the project. And it would probably have to be borne using state dollars, state and local dollars, because if it's not in the MPO's tip, it would not be eligible for federal money. So that is something that we have to work. We continue to show freeway BRT lanes on the maps that we show of the project for that segment, simply because that is the LPA that the board selected. That is what we are going to try and implement. Because there's two issues going on. There's the project, and then there's the issue with the Hillsborough TPO and what is and what is not in the tip. If it's not going to be in the tip and this board wants to continue to pursue freeway BRT lanes in that segment of 275, then it's going to have to look at other options and coordinate with the state on some other way to fund it. That's the best answer I can give you at this point.
And excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering, you know, to avoid throwing the baby out with the bathwater, you know, is it possible or preferable to also show a scenario where it's running in mixed traffic in that scenario, which, you know, I know it hurts the viability of the route, but, you know, it seems to me like that is the most likely scenario given where we're at right now, in that there's so much up in the air with that segment, and anything that, you know, we would have to study or look at as an alternative would be even adding more time to that, whereas just saying it runs in mixed traffic as a backup plan at least gets the route up and running to a certain point in time. You know, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I'm just curious if it does.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll be honest, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not really familiar with other projects that have moved forward with 2 LPAs. So like I said, I can't give you I couldn't give you a definite answer on that right now.
Clarifying question on that. I mean, for that segment, this TBARTA plan does require a dedicated lane for that service, correct?
Yes.
So that would be a lane that would have to be added, which is what Josh is referring to, is not in the TPO tip.
Right.
Okay. Just to be sure. Yeah.
Which is why, you know, my thinking is, again, it's probably too late, but for the LPA to be a version without those lanes, I think makes a lot of sense because we're now showing something that we know is at least within the realm of possibility, and we eliminate another unknown, and we don't, run the risk of not having any of this whatsoever. But understanding that that does impact ridership and cost estimates and all that stuff, all that aside, it is a more feasible option at this moment. So it's a bit of a, it's not misleading, but it's almost, hyperbole at this point to suggest an LPA that really is not not feasible. I mean, it's just not in the cards right now. We're hoping for a miracle from the Hillsborough County TPO. So, I mean, I don't want to spend too much more time on this, but I think it's not useless, but kind of pointless.
David
I
Green,
guess-
you have a
I guess
comment?
that question would come back to the board because an alternative that you're suggesting might not be acceptable to the board at all. I know dedicated lanes all the way up to Pasco County were very important to Pasco County. So if, the only option were to run in general traffic, then they might not want to advance the project whatsoever. As Brian alluded to, we haven't approached the state and talked to them, had any conversations whatsoever about the cost or funding sources of implementing a dedicated transit lane without federal funds, because that could be an option as well, in which case it would need to be in a TIP. The state would just be able to do that on their own. So that hasn't been exhausted at all. So there are, I guess, some steps that we would need to take along the way before we got to the suggestion that you made.
Yeah, appreciate that illumination. And Josh raises a significant issue. I mean, we've got a plan that at the moment we can't implement. So, and I'm embarrassed to say that Pinellas seems to have their act together. Pasco seems to have their act together. And those of us in Hillsborough County haven't quite figured out what we want to be. So we'll keep working on it. Anything else on this issue? Okay, let's move on our agenda to new business and committee discussion. The first item is the TBARTA planning studies update. Brian,
Thank you,
back to
Mr. Chair. I won't update you on the 275 RRT since we just saw the presentation, but we do have some other studies going on. We have a similar RRT study going on for US 19. That is looking at applying the RRT concept on US 19 in Pasco and Pinellas County, going from State Road 52 up in the north in Pasco down to the Gateway Carillon area of microphone does not like me, down to the Gateway Carillon area. So about roughly a distance of 37 miles. WSP is also the consultant for this study. Right now, what they're doing is they are developing 6 different alternatives. There's 3 low-cost alternatives and 3 high-cost alternatives. The 3 low-cost alternatives, the bus would be in mixed traffic. It would rely primarily on things like transit signal prioritization and queue jumps at intersections for it to stay on schedule. When it gets to the elevated portion of US 19, it would have access to bustle and shoulder operations, similar to what PSTA is demonstrating right now on 275. That's the 3 low cost. The 3 high cost options would still include TSP, would still include queue jumps, but on the sections of US 19 that are at grade, it would include BAT lanes, these business access transit lanes that like what the Sunrunner is going to use. And on the elevated section of US 19, it would have, where it's physically possible, the freeway BRT lanes similar to what we're proposing on 275. Right now, we are conducting one-on-one briefings with the Pasco and Pinellas County commissioners. We just want to feel them out, show the concept to them, talk about some of the alternatives we're looking at, because we want to get their reaction to it. We want to find out up front if there is any serious political opposition to this concept, similar to what we're experiencing with Hillsborough County. So far, all of the briefings we've done have gone very well. haven't really encountered any significant opposition to it. We still have several more briefings to do. We're planning on wrapping up that study in August. Next study I'll update you on is the gondola study. This study is looking at the potential of an urban aerial gondola in downtown St. Pete and in Clearwater, connecting downtown Clearwater to Clearwater Beach across the causeway. Based on direction that we got from City of St. Petersburg staff, which is based on direction they got from the new mayor, we're going to focus our remaining effort on the study on Clearwater. Mayor Welch feels that it just makes more sense that if you're going to do an urban aerial gondola in the Tampa Bay area, the Clearwater corridor, it just makes more sense to start. We are working with City of Clearwater staff right now. We're trying to nail down their preferred location for the downtown gondola station, because we've kind of reached a point in the study where the consultant can't really go any further with the analysis in terms of, you know, coming up with a what they call I think they call it a rope diagram, you know, kind of like laying out where the stations are going to be and getting into the specifics until we get some more clear direction from the city on, well, where do you want the station in downtown? This study as well, we're planning on wrapping up in August. And that's my planning update.
Questions for Brian about those two studies?
We do, I mean, we do certainly want to come before this committee. We just want to wait until we have something more, I guess, concrete to show you than just what we have so far.
So I think what I heard you say is that the focus of the gondola study is going to be in the downtown Clearwater to Clearwater Beach segment.
Right. The consultant, I mean, he did come up, they came up with several different alternatives for downtown St. Petersburg. I mean, all of them are technically feasible. It's just that, okay, and so we have lines on a map of where you could put a gondola in downtown St. Petersburg, but we're kind of, at this point, we're kind of stopping where we are, and we're gonna just, for the rest of the study, we're gonna get more into the specifics in Clearwater.
Okay, and will that study include at least some in-depth analysis of the ridership?
It's going to include, yes, it's going to look at traffic and parking needs. It's going to look capital and operating costs, different strategies for how you could finance it. The consultant team is fairly confident that that the project in Clearwater could be privately funded, that there would be enough of a demand. The firm that's doing the study is a company called SCJ Alliance. They're actually, they specialize in gondola planning and research. They actually do have some contacts with private capital investors. And one of the things they're going to be doing is reaching out to them and kind of sharing with them some information about the concept that's being considered to find out how much private sector interest there would be in this corridor. And that'll be included in a study.
Great, good. Josh, you have a question?
For the US 19 study, is there, can you give us a little bit more idea about around the scope? Like, are they looking at land use and development patterns at station areas? Is it just lines on a map at this point?
I mean, it is one of the things that they're going to be taking into consideration when they look at the station locations.
Existing land use, but not looking at
Even
TOD?
future, yes. I mean,
Okay.
in fact, I mean, I just had a phone conversation today with a planner from Pinellas County that's doing a land use study on the US 19 corridor. And because we want to definitely take into consideration what future plans the county has for US 19. In terms of you asked about the scope of work, when we get this study done, in terms of the deliverables, what we'll have is a 10% design for the preferred alternative. We'll have capital and operating cost estimates, a concept of operations. And the recommendations could very well be split up into short-term recommendations, stuff that could be implemented quite easily today, and more longer-term recommendations that might have to wait till further down the road when, say, for example, like after the county or FDOT has any repavement or restriping projects, you know, where when they do it, they can include a bat lane. for something, for that type of improvement, we might have to wait a little longer for that to be implemented. So that's why I say there could be both short and long-term recommendations. The goal is when we wrap up this study, that this concept would be adopted into both the Fort Pinellas Long Range Transportation Plan and the Pasco MPO Long Range Transportation Plan. So then the project could become eligible for federal money.
So I guess I have two comments or thoughts or, questions. One is I think the study needs to be rather robust in its land use side of things, because in terms of TOD and all the other elements that we've talked about with the BRT or the RRT and the BRT in Hillsborough, we want the ridership to be good. We want the development to support the transit, and we want it to last. I think without that, you run the risk of making an investment that, as we've said before with the RRT, for example, we don't want to just de facto widen US 19 and then not have the transit to run in perpetuity. So I'm a little bit cautious about that, because I remember the last time I was going to SBC when US 19 was widened, and it killed almost every business on US 19 for most of Pinellas County. All the mom and pop businesses are gone. It's all car dealerships now. So I'm very sensitive to that, that notion. So I think TOD is a way to fix that, though. The second comment is I'm going to repeat myself. I know I said it last time. I don't mean to beat you up, Brian. I think it's a serious short-sighted. It's seriously short-sighted to not consider US 19 all the way down to the Sunrunner and to connect into St. Petersburg. To have the scope end at the gateway is missing a major opportunity to connect North Pinellas and our only BRT route in Pinellas County. For it to not go that far south, I think is just it's a miss. And there might be a phase 2, a later date, where we can talk about connectivity in that regard. But I think without that, it's the density's not really there, and I'm not convinced that it's going to be a successful transit route without that level of connectivity, which I think would be great. So that's all I have. Thank you.
I'm glad you brought up the topic of TOD, because that did remind me, we got an email notification a few days ago that I think the Federal Transit Administration, I believe sometime in May, is going to be posting a notice of funding opportunity for TOD studies. And we've been talking about maybe doing, as a complement to this study, doing some sort of a TOD study along the corridor.
Good point. Travis?
Thank you, Chair. As a resident of Clearwater and also someone that's heard Daryl Clare and hosted him at a chamber event for his gondola presentation, I'm interested in that, especially with the parcels of land that are still available in downtown Clearwater where the city hall is located, and they still own the rights to the property right adjacent to it, along with Imagine Clearwater going down. I think the only concern that I think I would have, looking at the studies in the future, is when I remember when Daryl Clare talked about as being as a private operator for the gondolas, was that a guaranteed ridership of 1 million, would make it feasible, each year. And if that's built into it, and then who at agency would cover that shortfall was one of the questions I always had for him. And he kind of just winked at me, and it was like, well, yeah, I know who's going to cover that. That's the taxpayers. So I think that's the one thing that's important with the private contractors looking at that. Yes, they can operate it, yes, they can build it, but it's all into the details of their guaranteed ridership on those. So that's it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the consultant, I believe it was last month, we had a meeting with Mayor Hibbert, and we did specifically talk about that. And he made it clear that as far as he's concerned, that's a non-starter.
Okay, good comment, Travis. Anyone else? Anyone online care to comment further? If not, we'll move to our next agenda item, which is the commuter services update. Mr. Bowden, are you available? I am. Oh, here, I'm sorry. I'm looking for you online. Welcome, Kit.
Yeah, I just want to provide you with a little bit of information on the van pool program, and a program to form carpools between folks living around the region and their commute down to USF Health in downtown Tampa. Just to start off with the van pool program, we've been staying at about 160 vans per month. We went down to 157 in February. Part of that was related to troop deployments and to retirements going on at the Florida State National Cemetery. And I'm happy to report that we're right at 165 at the end of March. I checked today and we're actually up to 167. I just want to make clear that 5 of these van pools we share credit with District 1's van pool program because they're in Manatee County. So right now, I think we're in pretty good shape. We're seeing a lot of interest in the van pool program, both with the cost of parking at downtown locations, but in particular with the cost of gasoline. We will have about 5 additional van pools coming online, actually 6 additional van pools through the month of April, 1 scheduled for McDill, 4 at James Haley, and another one at the TSA here at Tampa International Airport. We are working with other entities, and I just want to make clear that we have in various states of progress a van pool programs going on with both the airport authority here at Tampa International Airport, company by the name of Fit Life Foods, Panitas Bakery, McGuire's Outdoor Living, which is a landscape company and is having a difficult time getting workers to on-site locations, the FBI, and an employment agency by the name of Express Employment Professionals. We hope to have some new entities or businesses that aren't part of the federal employment system on board here shortly. So in May, when we do an update, hopefully we'll have some positive information from that. I do want to mention a carpool formation program that I mentioned earlier. This is in conjunction with the Downtown Tampa Partnership and USF Health. The van pool program is not a good fit for those individuals. Most of them are under 25 years of age, so we have difficulty finding drivers. And for the purposes of insurance, it's difficult to bring somebody on to the van pool program if they don't meet that minimum age requirement. So what we've been doing is working with, we've identified over 380 individuals who need assistance getting to USF Health. And there's the cost of parking and again, the cost of driving alone. So this is really an effort to help those students spend less money. We have 3 different schedules that we're working with. And out of this, we've been able to group folks into 24 potential carpool formation groups. So we'll be continuing work with the Downtown Tampa Partnership to enact this. The next step moving forward with this is actually meeting with those students and working basically in groups to get those carpools actually formed. I just wanted to mention that to you. I'm actually joined by my colleague here, Arlinda Caruli. She's with Commute with Enterprise. And Arlinda, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, what I'd like to add is give a better update in May and share those numbers. In fact, while we were sitting here, I probably got three additional emails with requests to get some pricing, more from McDill than I have seen before. So it's a good sign. James A. Haley is probably one of our largest accounts, and I know that they've got some parking concerns. So we're working on additional marketing material to get on site to talk about gas prices, right? To let people know exactly how they can sign up. And the focus is not just starting, let me take this off, starting new van pools, but it's also increasing participation in the existing van pools so that we can get high occupancy and, better numbers and hopefully no out of pocket because it is a federal site. So a lot more calls from private sector, which Ken and I have really been focusing out there, going to a lot of workforce events, being involved with the economic development, anything really we can do to help with recruitment or retention being a big challenge, but also parking concerns and sustainability, being able to measure those numbers is a great feeling sharing it back. So appreciate the feedback and hopefully we'll, again, it may reconnect and have some amazing numbers for you guys. Any questions? Yeah.
I don't think that we can go a day nowadays without hearing about the rising cost of housing, whether it be ownership or renting here in the area. Do we have the capacity to be more robust in marketing our van pools, car pools, such that we can partner with private companies? Because if their employees can participate in even this kind of transit, they're going to have more money to spend at the end of the month.
Yeah, I think that really is the goal, is to get partnership with private businesses, to get them to actually kick in an amount to help drive down the price of van pool for their employees. But even if they don't kick in anything right now, just I think sharing the ride alone, we estimate that if the cost of a van pool is, let's say, $1,200 to lease the vehicle with the $400 subsidy that TBARTA provides, if you have a van pool of 15 individuals, that's about $53 per person per month. That's under the cost of a transit pass, a monthly transit pass. It's really an affordable cost for a lot of people. Not everyone.
No.
But for a lot of folks.
Right. And I think that the way that we should be reaching out to the public and private employers is we're hearing over and over again that their housing costs are so high. If they can decrease another part of their budget, they're going to have more money at the end of the month. I'm sure you're going to think this sounds crazy, but Key West Transit is a key player in getting service workers to Key West and back out again, because those service workers can't afford to live in Key West where the jobs are. And Key West Transit is running all the way from Marathon down. And that's how those service personnel get into Key West and provide the services.
I can add to that too, because I recently took over District 1. So what Ken was mentioned, we partnered up with DOT directly, and FDOT is subsidizing all of District 1, 12 counties, $500 a month. And right there, I mean, we're lucky to have all these federal sites that have additional funding in place. But in that area, it's primarily hospitality. And like you said, no one can afford to be on the island, outside that island. So they end up traveling 30 or 40 miles one way to get to the work site. So what we end up seeing there, and really what I push for from the beginning of the conversation with a lot of work sites, private sector, is subsidize the program for your employees. How much does it cost you to recruit a person, to retrain them, right? To get them stabilized, not just days, time, money, right? And that's another convincing factor to have them say, you know what, I'm just going to pay for the full van pool. We're going to provide the gas card for them, which is something we include. A lot of them are going, Sun Pass is like $6 one way just to get into Sanibel Island. So we've got about 35 van pools and growing. And that's just over the last year. And it's funny looking at those numbers, we have over 400 participants, which is about half of what we have in the program now. So they're maximizing those 15 passenger vehicles, right? great occupancy because the work site is paying for the van pool. So more, folks you've got in a van, the less you end up paying because it's being split across. So that's really a great suggestion. And what we've been doing from day one is getting the employees or the employer to hopefully pay for the cost of van pool.
Sounds great, and thank you.
Yeah, and looking at those rural areas too, a lot of them are hiring from there. We hear Tampa companies are hiring Lakeland. That's a pretty long distance, right? So we're telling them, hey, when you're doing that and you're focusing on certain pockets, certain regions, why don't you start a van pool program? We had Naples Grand Beach Resort. I'm just going to throw this in. They did an event with Career Source. They focused on, not sure if you're familiar with Immokalee, low income housing. And it's like a 50 minute drive to the site. So they actually had an event. They told them we're going to have transportation. So they did it backwards. They took the van pool. They identified a driver that was already using that route. And they hired 17 people on the spot because transportation was the issue. So we're trying the same approach here in the Tampa Bay area.
Good. Bill Johnson?
Thank you. The question that I was ready to ask was Clearwater Beach hotels. There's one under construction, getting close to completion. And tomorrow there's going to be another hearing on another new big hotel out there. So are you doing anything on Clearwater Beach?
Yeah, we're actually partnered up with Amplify out there. So we've had quite a few events. Transportation Committee, when they had the meetings, we were part of those. The biggest struggle and the challenge we're running on right now, ideally, we like to connect with human resources because we have access, or they have access to analytics they can provide to show us where their employees are coming from. And right now they are really having a hard time because they don't have enough staff. So it's a challenge to get in front of them. Ken and I have been calling time and time again. We've got a lot of partners involved. So Wyndham Grand was probably one of the larger sites that we've had some conversation with out there, and a few other partners that it sounds like they're renting spots from their neighbors, right? So certainly would love to see more. Tradewinds is another one. I know not quite Clearwater, but more on the St. Pete side that has some parking challenges that we're having conversations with.
I will mention too that there is transit service in Clearwater, St. Pete's that actually is attractive for folks that are working at those locations and provides a good supplement rather than just diving into Vanpool. We're hearing from a lot of the folks at those hospitality locations that their employees are already utilizing transit services. I just wanted to mention that too. And in contrast, like the East Bay of Tampa Bay, those folks are actually coming to us and asking for help because there isn't any transit service in that area to speak of. And I think it really goes to show that Vanpool can fill that gap until transit service is provided in those locations.
Great, good. Bob Henyon, you have a comment?
Let me see how to turn this on. Okay. This may be a little convoluted and difficult, but I'm also involved with the Community Redevelopment Agency in Dunedin. And we have a real problem with parking and getting affordable housing for workers in the area of the downtown. We just bought a parking lot, less than 2 acres, for $4 million, just for vacant land. We have a lot of people who work at a lot of different shops, restaurants, etc. And it could be coordinated through the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Merchants Association, or the Community Redevelopment Agency of the city. But you might be able to package something together where you had 2 people working in one restaurant, 3 in another, 5 in a shop over here, and put it together, because we really don't have room for people to bring their own vehicles into downtown.
Yeah, yeah. So basically a van pool that would make multiple stops at multiple employers. No, that's not convoluted at all. That's a great plan.
But isn't even that difficult of different stops, because they're all in this little bitty area of a few blocks.
Yeah, yeah.
We've
we
seen
can-
that approach with hospitality in the
Right.
past to where it's, 2 or 3 hotels on a smaller side.
Mm-hmm.
Housekeeping is always usually on the same schedule, and they end up utilizing it and just all paying their portion right for the seat. So it's definitely something that we try to connect others around the areas if there's multiple work sites, to see if they can all go in on it. And more people means a higher chance of a van pool being on the road. We also love to partner up with development companies too. So we've had some conversation, especially in the university area. So if you have any suggestions, please let Ken and I know. It always helps letting the development company know that there is a solution to parking challenges, is just introducing to the employees or the workers coming on site this van pool program.
Good,
Thank you.
good,
Thank you.
good point. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Karen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Bob was saying about the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe Travis can give us some insight on how that might work for TBARTA to reach out to some of these organizations. In addition, I'd like to see the agencies, state agencies within the area could also, I mean, they for the most part do not have parking problems, but they're going to have transportation issues. So I know we have a state agency, a big building at Ulmerton and 113th in Pinellas County. Let's start thinking outside the box for some of these things. And also I'd like to reach out to the visitor bureaus, visit St. Pete, Clearwater, Tampa Bay, visit Tampa Bay, to get them involved in some of this.
That's great.
Thank you, Karen. Good suggestions. Good suggestions all. Anything else from the committee? Ken, I got to tell you what I told you last month. I mean, this is a real success story for TBARTA. You were both to be congratulated on doing a great job. I mean, 165, now 167 van routes is, I think, a true success. Let's just see if we can keep it growing.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
Good report. All right. The next item on our agenda is the communications update from Chris.
Thank you, and I will be brief. In addition to the information that you should have in your packet on the communications report, just point out that we have a number of podcast episodes this month and actually coming up. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. We talked to Greg Slater, who's the new executive director and CEO of THEA last week. Very resourceful and experienced professional that we have at the head of THEA, and shared a lot of great ideas there. Abhishek Dayal of PSTA and Adelita Grand were on an episode that we posted just this week, talking about their 2 biggest capital project needs. Of course, in PSTA, it's the Clearwater Transit Center, and it's the heavy maintenance facility over at Hart. That episode was initiated by PSTA, asking us for some help because they're trying to generate more grassroots attention for that much needed transit center. As you know, it's well regarded by federal officials, but there's just so many transit projects out there that are seeking funding that it just hasn't made the cut yet. And they're hoping that a little more public attention, a little more public pressure will help get it across the finish line this time. And then Brandon Campbell of the city of Tampa, who's about to initiate a MOS, Mobility as a Service program. He's been working on that for quite some time. He's going to talk to us later this month on MOS. And of course, that is really an emerging trend in public transit that TBARTA supports. And so exploring that issue later this month, that will also drop as well too. So it's on the go, and you can Mobility as a Service. Yep, KAS. And we'll talk about that a little later this month. So just wanted to point out what the podcast is, because the intention of the podcast is to help to facilitate the conversation and really show that TBARTA is partnered with a lot of other of our transit and transportation providers, getting the message and the information out, because all of us have issues and struggles and needs. And the more that the community that we support can understand those, we feel the better we can get to solving some of those issues. So those are the only things I'd like to add in the communication report. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. Any questions of Chris or comments on the communications report? Karen, I don't want to skip over you if you've got any questions. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. The next item on our agenda is the committee vacancies. We've got a few vacancies. That report is in your packet. Brian, you want to give us an update on where we stand on maybe filling some of those?
Sure. We currently have 5 vacancies on the CAC. So we have a vacancy for the at-large member. That's a vacancy because we have a one of the governor appointees to our board seat is vacant, and that would be appointed by that board person. The Manatee County representative, that was vacated by Corinne Tucker. The Hart representative, that was vacated when Leo Doseretz stepped down. The Pasco MPO rep, when that was represented by Rob Sirku. The Hernando Citrus MPO rep, that's pending at the upcoming board meeting. We will be taken to the board for approval. Carlene Reese and Bob Esposito as the primary and alternate for Hernando Citrus MPO. Chris and I, we have reached out to find replacements for these seats with Manatee. We've reached out to Commissioner Bellamy. We've also reached out to Dave Hutchinson, who is the MPO director for Sarasota Manatee. For Hart, we've reached out to Ms. LeGrand at Hart, and with Pasco, we've reached out to Carl McKiska, the Pasco MPO director. So we are trying to get them filled. If you happen to know anyone from Manatee, Hart Rider, or someone from Pasco County that would be interested in being a CAC member, please let me or Chris know. But we are trying to get them filled.
So as I understand what you said is you have a candidate for position and alternate in Hernando, but no candidates identified for the other position.
That is correct.
Okay, good. Questions from the committee? Yes, Bob Henry.
Yeah, this is sort of out of left field type of thing. But we also have a number of us who are on the board now who will be term limiting out in the future. If there's any way of us being retained on an emergency basis to not further exacerbate the vacancies until you fill them, might be considered.
You want to comment
I don't know how
on
you
that?
I have no idea of the mechanics of how you would do it or the board would do it. Or if they can.
Well, I don't want to speak for Brian, but my understanding is that the appointments to this committee are for a term.
Right.
But until your replacement is named, you are eligible to serve if you choose to. Is that a?
I'd have to go, to be honest, I'd have to go and reread the bylaws. I don't want to give an answer off the top of my head about what the rules
And
are.
I'm just thinking it would be a shame to exasperate the 5 vacancies by having 3 or 4 more people be terminated.
Well, certainly from a staff perspective, we're not in a rush to kick anyone off the committee. so.
Nor does Bob want to be terminated. So. All
Not in
right.
an unkind way, at least.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Any other comments or questions on the vacancy report?
I just wanted to ask for the at-large, who is the board member that's making that appointment?
Well, that is one of the governor appointee seats that's vacant.
Okay. So it would have to be from the governor's office to make that appointment? Is that what you're
But
saying?
The governor has to appoint a new member to the board to
Oh,
fill that
oh, oh.
seat, and then that board member has to nominate a
Gotcha.
CAC
Gotcha.
member.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next item is our legislative update. Chris is going to give us the news.
Thank you. I'll give you a couple of notes, having spoken to Harry Glenn and Ron Pierce on the federal and the state front. First, on the federal front, Congress did finish up its work on the fiscal 22 budget, and the president signed that into law on March 11th. That clears the way for the Department of Transportation to begin work on a lot of the funding that was cleared because of the bipartisan infrastructure law. Now the U.S. Department of Transportation is working on a variety of new funding opportunities that are going to come in 5 funding cycles. Important to note that in all of this funding, there needs to be a local and a state match. So TBARTA is not in a position to benefit from that immediately. Probably, on the horizon certainly is RRT and entering the CIG Capital Investment Grants Program. The good news is because there are 5 funding cycles here, even if we're not entering now, the new money that's available this year and even the next year are going to address other areas transit needs because of course there are a lot of them. It's going to clear out that backlog of projects and clear out some of the competition that we would otherwise face. So we don't have a timeline on when RRT would enter CIG. That's to be determined. But assuming that comes in the next couple of years, even allowing other programs to go first and get some of this money and get more of this money now could be beneficial to TBARTA in the long run. On the state front, we have 2 items in the budget that will be beneficial to TBARTA. $375,000 for general operations that the Senate and the House have put into the budget, which will go to the governor. And then $1 million for resumption of TD Tampa Bay. That budget has not gone to the governor yet, as I understand, and Ron tells me the Senate and the House are not in a hurry to do so, because once they do present it to him, he has a certain time frame. So most likely, we're not going to hear from the governor until May at the earliest on these things. The budget, of course, itself does not begin until July 1st. But related to TD Tampa Bay, while we're on that topic, and hopefully going to resume that, both Brian and I were at the Tampa Regional Planning Council Awards event today, and I want to point out that TD Tampa Bay was recognized with the first place award for community service because of our regional initiative to connect people who are most in need of transportation support. So it's great to see that 7-month pilot project for TD Tampa Bay gets this type of recognition. I got to tell you, we're very proud of that service. It demonstrates TBARTA's ability to provide transit service, and to do it for those who are most in need of support is really something I feel very good about, and I hope we all feel very good that we're part of an organization that does that. And it's great to see that the Regional Planning Council provided us this recognition. So thank you for that.
That's great recognition. Congratulations to all the TBARTA staff. Comments or questions from the committee? Karen or Sarah? I have one question that you mentioned about the federal funding requiring a local match. Can you give us any insight as to what might be coming to the TBARTA board in terms of securing the funding ability to have that local match available?
I think it's on a per project basis, quite frankly, but I would defer both to David and Brian for any thoughts on that.
Okay. Thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, that's correct. Most federal money, these are discretionary funds we're talking about where you have to have a project and you have to identify. I mean, for the most part, the way federally funded projects work is, they can fund up to 80% federal, 20%, some combination of local and state. And so when you apply for those federal funds, for that 80%, you have to show where your local 20% is coming from.
So my question is, when we have an identified project and we're ready to make that application, I guess we're going to go back to our member municipalities and the state of Florida and seek their contribution, for lack of a better word, to make that 20% or whatever the percentage is. Is that
correct? I mean, to bring this home with the RRT project, I mean, that's really the one big project we're working on where at some point, we can only kick the can so far down the street. At some point, it's put up or shut up. Are we going to do this or not? And if we're going to pursue this federal, in this case, CIG money, we're going to have to show where is the local money coming from the state, from Hillsborough County, Pasco County, and Pinellas County.
okay? Any other questions?
I was just going to add, I mean,
Please.
that's the same process that any transit agency would go through. PSTA had to find a local match for the Sunrunner project. HART needs to find a local match for its heavy maintenance facility. The streetcar extension in Tampa, I mean, anybody that pursues any specific project will have to go through this. If it's not RRT for us, say it's the US 19 RRT, we'll have to go to Pasco and Pinellas. The state is generally always receptive to putting in the state funds and generally are willing to do whatever they can to advance projects, but it's always been that local piece, which has been the holdup because there is no county in Tampa Bay that has any sort of a dedicated local funding source.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. Thanks, David. Yes, Josh.
So I have a member's interest, new business comment. I don't know if now's the appropriate time, but I assume it is. Okay, so I sent this to staff yesterday, so I apologize for the late notice. But I also I'm the vice president of Walk Bike Tampa, and we had a really enlightening presentation from Marlin Engineering, which has donated some services on behalf of the Tampa Downtown Partnership and a micro grant that we provided at Walk Bike to install a bike ped counter at Davis Islands Bridge. And it was really a phenomenal presentation because essentially they were able to show, based off that camera, movement of people walking and people biking and using micro mobility devices, where they were doing so in the actual still image of the camera. So you'd see red lines for people riding bikes and yellow lines for where people were walking and where they were jaywalking and where they were making connections, all sorts of stuff. It was really fantastic. This was a pilot program, and they left off the presentation saying they would love to do more of these types of projects regionally, and they're looking for partners to do so and to host them. So at the very least, I would love to have them come and present to us, to have the rest of the board see this presentation, see what potential there is, not only for the counters, but the metrics and the decision making that comes from that information. So for example, that Davis Island Bridge intersection, we found out was about half as much bike ped traffic as parts of the Riverwalk. And this area only had about a 5-foot sidewalk. So it shows you a disconnect between activity and infrastructure. So there's going to hopefully be some improvements there that are made. So again, they're looking for a regional host. I think this aligns exactly with some of the things we're looking to do and would be a pretty low hanging fruit, honestly, coming from the discussion we had today in terms of regional trail connectivity between our counties. So between the Riverwalk, Pinellas Trail, anything in Pasco, as well as Manatee, Sarasota. So
what is their ask?
I don't know. They're looking for somebody to host the database, to become the champion of regional mobility data in terms of walking and bike. So there's some infrastructure costs, I believe, for finding and paying for the equipment, which in this case was borrowed from FDOT. And so there's some of that. There's also where the data lives, that sort of thing. So I'm not entirely sure. I don't want to speak for them. So I would just, start by saying I've sent the email address and the contact information to staff, hoping that they can facilitate that discussion, and then we can kind of go from there.
If that's for regional, wouldn't we go to it used to be the Sheriff's Coordinating Council, what are we calling it now? But to find a.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I certainly have no objection if the committee wants to get a presentation on this, but based on what I've heard, my initial reaction was this sounds like this might be something for the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance. The reason why I say that is because they're the ones that produced the regional multi-use trail map. And I see what you're talking about kind of fits into that.
Give it a good slide. Well done. Well, in any case, I don't know if it's appropriate for us, if it fits with us, or if we can just be a champion and a partner and facilitate that. It was a compelling enough presentation that I felt like it was worth seeing for the rest of the board. So.
What's the sense of the committee? Would that be something?
Like I said, I certainly don't have any objection to getting a presentation on it to the committee. I'm hesitant to say whether or not it would be worth taking this to the board, because we are a transit authority and I want to make sure we stay focused on what our mission is. But that being said, I mean, it still might be worth for us to see it and for me to see it and then possibly pass it on to the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance.
There could be a tie to commuter services if it's
Yeah.
bike ahead.
Yeah.
Those are parts of the service.
Yeah, I mean, until I see the presentation, it's hard for me to comment on it. So I say,
Right,
well,
and so
why not
I'm-
have why not have this person come present to this committee and just take a look at what they have to say and then we go from there.
That's all I'm asking for. You know, I didn't mean to insinuate anything else because obviously I'm not entirely sure how it fits, but I do believe that there is some benefit at least. And if not, we can direct them in the right direction, point them in the right direction. Although I do consider walking and biking to be transit, but we can have that debate separately.
Some of that information we might be able to take back to the Forward Pinellas CIC as well, which is coming up. We have
Next
3
week.
members.
Next week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm hearing is that the committee would be interested if Brian can schedule a presentation. We'll learn more about it.
Yep.
If it looks like it's transit oriented, maybe we pass it to the board or we pass it someplace else. Is that fair?
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Name of the group?
Her name
Okay.
was Liz Stoles with Marlin Engineering, MARLIN.
Anything else on legislative update?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. The actual next item on our agenda is items to report to the TBARTA board. Anything in particular that has come out of this meeting other than a general report that staff prepares and I also give an oral report? Any specific recommendations or requests? All right.
I thought Josh had a couple of recommendations for Ms. Miklas to consider. You made a couple of recommendations for her, I thought.
Oh, you mean for the Riverwalk?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll include those in our report. Correspondence, we have, I think in your package, you have a piece of correspondence that was sent to us. Any other new business to come before the committee? We'll look forward to filling those vacancies when we can. Randy, again, welcome for your first official meeting. You've been a real trooper the last couple, so thanks for coming and thanks for doing the presentation. So there being no further business, we will stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming. And let me thank the Aviation Authority for hosting us here too. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, the folks at the airport have been great in hosting us here. And I want to thank Rob Porter and Carol, who is the administrative assistant who helped us with this. So many thanks. Actually saw Joe Pan earlier today and was able to thank him personally for this use of this beautiful room.
Good.
So,
And if any of you have not gotten your parking validated yet, please see Lorraine.
and the way that works, as I understand, is you take the tickets that you got, you put it in first, you wait for the payment thing to come up, and then you put in the green ticket. Is that correct, Lorraine? Then you put in the green. So the green ticket's like your cash, essentially, for payments.
Okay, good. Well, thank you all for doing that. Yeah, yeah.